It's Championship Sunday. Occupy family. It's Walid. I'm here with Brian as always, and three more games left in the football season, and that's it.
Four, if we include the Pro Bowl slate. Let's not forget about
Ah,
that.
that's true. Good point. Well, for the meaningful games at least. But yeah, there is a Pro Bowl slate, and those are as wacky as you can imagine. But let's talk about the two games we have in store. Both sites will offer a main slate with which features both games, but also single games, right? For those that are chasing satellite tickets, which we'll get to here in a second. Higher level, we have the Chiefs and the Titans. That implied total is 53 points. The Chiefs are 7.5 point favorites. The line remains the same, but the total did go up a point and a half. And then the 49ers will host the Packers. The Niners are 7.5 point favorites in a game that is 46.5 points for its implied total. And the line has moved half a point in San Fran's favor, and the implied total has moved up a point and a half from 45 to 46 and a half. So obviously, the Chiefs have the highest implied total on the slate. The Niners have the second. We have two touchdown favorites here, but you can't just build lineups with those two teams, right?
You can damn sure try. I think you can. There's a couple guys you can fit in that have value on both sides. But just looking from a high level, what we like to do with these lines and line moves. I was a little bit interested, Waleed, that the Chiefs total went up a point and a half. It's going to be really cold there. Kind of similar weather as last week, 20 degrees, maybe a little bit colder in the wind chill. So we'll see how that goes. But no clear decision on where the public stands so far. Both games are about 50-50 split in tickets. We'll see how that ends up this weekend. But what are your initial thoughts on the spread? Who covers based on the line movement and what we've seen so far?
I mean, my initial thought on just the line itself, I think I feel like both home teams are in a good position to make these games not really entertaining. I think they're on a collision course, the Chiefs and the Niners now. I could very well be wrong, but a number of things with how these teams match up just make me feel like you're going to see home teams drop 35 plus and cruise their way to victories.
I definitely think that's the case too. We saw last week. We talked about wild card teams winning, coming into the divisional round, being underdogs, having tough roads ahead of them. Those teams went 1-3, both straight up and against the spread. Now Green Bay and Tennessee again for the third time is in this same situation, and like you, I'm obligated to back the favorites here. I do think if one game is a little bit closer, it may be Green Bay, just based on
Mhm.
Jimmy G and his potential to melt down.
Turn the ball over here and there for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see how this goes, but based on these spreads, we know that most DFS players are going to think the same way. So we'll have to
Mhm.
kind of develop some ideas about how we can be contrarian in a high risk contest.
So let's go through just a couple of guys here that can very well tilt ownership. We'll start with the 49ers backfield. Now, last week, Raheem Mostert had 34% of the snaps, 12 total opportunities, and Tevin Coleman had 46% of the snaps with 22 opportunities. So I think he had a cramped calf during the game. He was sick during the week, dehydrated. I mean, was it like a perfect storm, or do you think they just, said, "Hey, Tevin Coleman, he's healthy. We're going to unleash him in the postseason"? Because Kyle Shanahan, we know he's a mastermind, especially with scheming up run plays, and he's just the type of guy I think who you can't really predict week in, week out.
Right, you definitely can. I think we can use that to our advantage. And we used that to our advantage last week. Like we talked about Tevin Coleman being near minimum price, and he was getting 40% of the snaps as of the regular season, and could very easily either lead the team in touches or outperform Mostert on his touches. And that did happen. But then if you look this week, it's kind of the opposite effect, where Mostert is cheaper. He's going to carry about half the ownership if our early ownership projections are accurate. And Mostert said he had a cramped calf last week, like you said, and if the play-by-play kind of backs that up too, where Mostert's last opportunity was late in the third quarter, didn't play any snaps in the fourth quarter. So this makes a ton of sense, and I think we've seen the explosiveness out of Mostert, and now we have the complete opposite public perception. To me, it seems like an easy call to go back to Mostert after the 1 week discrepancy.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, a little recency bias, right? That game was out of hand come fourth quarter. And I mean, Tevin Coleman found the end zone twice, and that's enough to sway their price points and also kind of the public's view. It's hard for me to say, based off everything I've seen thus far, that Tevin Coleman has taken a step forward above Raheem Mostert. Now, above like Raheem Mostert, but it could be. You just don't know, and I'd rather err on the side of getting some leverage. So I totally hear you there.
Yeah, and actually, just really quickly, like even let's say the same thing does happen this week, where Coleman gets 22 opportunities, Mostert gets 12. Mostert can still outscore him. It's not like the worst thing in the world if he's 1B compared to 1A. So
Totally, yeah, 100%. What about Devontae Adams and what we expect from the 49ers? We know that. I mean, look. The Packers, like offensive, like passing game starts and really ends with Devontae Adams. The 49ers are going to be smart about it. Matt LaFleur definitely expects that, they're either going to shadow him or have a corner and maybe play cloud coverage. Like there's just no doubt that the Niners are going to game plan for him. What does that do for his value, for his ownership, and maybe for other guys on Green Bay?
yeah, it's a great question, and what a novel concept to take away a team's number one wide receiver. Seattle had no interest in doing that last week, and
No.
Devontae Adams just absolutely went off. And like even even though he went off, like he dominated targets for that team. I mean, he had 10 targets last week, and you look at the other guys on the team, no one else had more than two. So I would think San Francisco does everything they can to shut that down, and Green Bay knows this. Aaron Rodgers came out today after practice and was like, yeah, they might move Richard Sherman around. Maybe they don't, but we're definitely going to move Devontae Adams around. But regardless of what happens, especially with recency bias for DFS players, Devontae could be one of the highest owned, if not the highest owned guy on the slate. So I think if San Francisco is successful in limiting him in any way, we can gain some leverage by using whether it's Jimmy Graham or some of these other Green Bay receivers. So I like the idea. Low risk contest, you almost have to play him, but I get the idea that San Francisco could shut him down.
Totally. So let's talk about some of these other Packers receivers they use for leverage. Allen Lazard, he had an injured ankle. He didn't return, but it looks like he should be good to go. He did practice today.
Yep, practice today. I think he's officially off the injury report. Is from what I understand, most medical experts think that it was a mild sprain. He'll be fine. So he was one of our underperforming receivers going into last week, and because he was injured early, obviously didn't get a chance to capitalize on that. So if you have a little carryover effect, maybe Lazard sees the benefit this week if the coverage is on Devontae.
Aaron Jones, he was a bell cow last week. 23 of the 25 running back touches went his way, 80% of the snaps, and Jamal Williams was active, right? So it wasn't a case of him not being healthy. But now when you have a defense like the Niners, who are definitely going to gear towards taking Devontae Adams out of the game, we know the Niners linebackers are incredible in coverage, but does this create maybe a funnel for some check down opportunities to Aaron Jones?
Yeah, you're reading my mind. I think we're on the same page here. The easy leverage is to go to Aaron Jones over Devontae Adams in DFS contests. So I like that idea, and this kind of just reinforces the fact, and it's kind of a recent trend where teams are resting, and by resting I mean just giving a break to their workload throughout the season. So while you and I were screaming in week 3, why is Jamal Williams getting 40-50% of the snaps? It's like, okay, maybe it's a little bit of load management by some of these NFL teams. When the playoff comes, we see guys like Aaron Jones, we see guys like Damian Williams in the Kansas City
We
game.
see guys like Sony Michel. Just kidding. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a good point. And he was obviously the bell cow last week, and he's very talented as a pass catcher. So, I mean, it's a perfect pivot away from Devontae Adams. And Just a great way to kind of, once again, you're thinking game script, right? If the Niners are up and Devontae Adams isn't having quite the game, but then you get these 2 minute drives where Aaron Rodgers is just checking the ball down a couple times. Very possible Aaron Jones racks up a number of catches.
Definitely. I mean, even in design plays as well, if the focus is on Devontae. So, and then I mentioned Damian
You trust
Williams.
LaFleur to design some plays here?
I think I do. I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, I think I do.
maybe.
We'll see. At least he's not Mike McCarthy.
I've been a little too hard on him. Yeah, I think he's been a lot better than at least we saw maybe week one against the Bears. But
Yeah.
for sure, I think they'll have him pretty involved in the passing game.
I think so too. And then speaking of involvement in the passing game and dominance of snaps, Damian Williams, moving on to the
Oof.
Kansas City game, 62 of the 64 snaps, all 100% of the running back opportunities last week. And I think we can expect more of the same this week. But my question to you, and I think a higher level question, especially on a 2 game slate, we have to think about chaos, we have to think about leverage. What are your thoughts on backup running backs on a 2 game slate? So guys like Deion Lewis, guys like Jamal Williams, guys like maybe Shady McCoy or Darwin Thompson, where the trend says that they're not going to play a ton. But what could happen? Is it worth playing those guys in hopes that something does happen to the starter?
Oof. It depends how high risk you're talking. I mean, if you're 150 maxing, I'm sure you're definitely going to feature a couple of other guys. But if you're playing, 2, 3 lineups in a 100 player contest, or even like, let's say it's a 1,500 or 2,000 person, like 3 max GPP, for me, it's hard to justify going away from. I mean, look, we have Aaron Jones, we have Derrick Henry, we have Damian Williams, and then we have the Niners too backs. It's hard for me justifying giving any exposure to anyone else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because, like, even, I mean, Tennessee would have to get absolutely freight trained in the first half for Dion to play a role in the second half. Like, they're
Yeah.
still going to stick with Derrick Henry. Jamal
Hmm.
Williams, we've seen, maybe Aaron Jones fumbles a couple times and Jamal Williams gets action. I don't know. But then Shady
Yeah.
McCoy, like, was sick this week, didn't play last week. He's the one, Damien's the one I feel most confident in being game script, situation proof.
Yeah. You're betting on an injury, which, I mean, it's just unlikely to happen if you have like 2, 3 lineups. And then the way these teams are built, I think there's so much leverage to be gained from some of their receiving
Yeah.
options that I'd rather take my kind of risks there.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Like there's you don't have to differentiate everywhere. There's not a need, and like this is the hardest place to differentiate, or even the least likely to work out. So I agree with you. I think looking at tight end, receiver, quarterback is the best way.
For sure. So, moving on, speaking of receivers, Adam Humphries, he plans to return. He's missed the last 6 games, returned to practice this week. He's obviously not just going to come in and play a ton of snaps. A guy most people have forgot about, especially with the rise of A.J. Brown in the last 2 months. But, I mean, at minimum price, if this is a guy in a favorable game script, yeah, he could get 3, 4 targets and maybe catch a touchdown.
Yeah, easily. Like just looking at some of the clips, he looks like he's at least decently healthy for the clips that I saw. And if he comes in, even if he plays 30-40% of the snaps, and Sharp still plays, Khalif Raymond still gets some snaps. I don't think it's a problem at all. And at minimum price for the 2 game slate, 3K on DraftKings, I think he's 4,500 on FanDuel. Like that's the guy you need that you can just punt at your third receiver position to help you fit
Mm-hmm.
in the 2 tight ends, help you fit in Damian or Aaron Jones or Devontae Adams, Patrick Mahomes. And if he gets a 0, it's not the worst in the world, but he does have upside to get 10 plus points. And then I think on Showdown, especially on DraftKings, where I think he's $800, that's a great punt play as well.
So I'll have to ask you, just like last week, it's a slate where we have two of the best tight ends in the league, right? Between Travis Kelsey and George Kittle. Then you throw in Janu Smith, and then even Jimmy Graham, who should get some more targets his way with how we expect the Niners to play Devontae Adams. Do you see this as an opportunity to use a tight end at the flex as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the popular lineup construction once again. I think a ton of people are going to go Kelsey Kittle and then figure out the rest of their lineup. And it's hard to blame them with the high volume at those 2 guys' prices. So I think that'll be popular. And whether it's pivoting to a different two tight end look or going three running backs or four receivers, that's probably the number one way to get a different lineup in high risk contests. But I think low risk contests, lead. I think you got to go both of them.
So let's talk kind of bigger picture and just what's available for the players on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I know you are racking up Super Bowl tickets. Is that what you think the focus should be?
Yeah, I'm a little biased, but I think that's a good plan. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I think when we talk about the occupy strategy in general, our satellite strategy, giving people chances at life-changing paydays, and when you can do it for 45 cents or 10 cents and get entries into a contest where, although it's unlikely, you still have a realistic shot at $1 million, right?
Hmm.
Both FanDuel and DraftKings are offering satellites for super cheap that all bankroll sizes can afford. That you should be trying to get as many tickets as possible, because by this point, if you've been following us all season, reading our daily plugs, watching our YouTube videos, listening to our podcast, you should have a pretty good idea of single game strategy at this point. And by being able to get cheap entries into a big contest, this is what you should be playing for.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. For someone that, let's say they haven't been utilizing the satellite strategy for the Super Bowl ticket here, and they got a couple hundred, in their bankroll, whatever the case is, do you think that they should focus on making, one or two lineups and, trying to enter them as many times, maybe 5, 10 times in these tickets, or do you think they should make multiple lineups and try to, hope they get one or two?
Yeah, it definitely depends on your bankroll, but I think we'll see overlay, and I think the way, especially on FanDuel, the way the tickets are set up, where they have a 100 ticket awarded contest, and some even higher ones. I would do your normal strategy. If you make one lineup per week, if you make three lineups per week, that's 99% of our people listening. Make those lineups and enter them equally into that contest and max it out. So if it's a 50, if it's, let's just say it's a 12 max, right? And you make three lineups, enter each one four times. So if one hits, you get four tickets, and
Hmm.
start doing that for every slate. Like NBA is going to have qualifiers. NHL, I think, will have qualifiers. The Pro Bowl next weekend will have qualifiers. So tons of ways to get it. And I think you're spot on to where you enter one lineup multiple times in the hopes that when it does hit, you collect a bunch.
Exactly. Cool. All right. Well, good luck to everyone playing this weekend. And you know where to find us at Occupy Fantasy. As far as the Periscope, Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I think we'll have a Periscope. We'll at least be on Twitch on Saturday. And
Hmm.
be sure to subscribe on YouTube, where we are doing two in-depth showdown videos as well. And that's addition to the daily plug and the Occupy model on occupyfantasy.com.
For sure. All right. Good luck, everyone. Enjoy the games, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for the Super Bowl slate.